So as part of our coverage of the elections, we shine a spotlight on different political parties. And this morning, we're in conversation with the Democratic Alliance. The party has been in hot water in recent weeks over the burning of the South African flag. In a statement, the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture, Zizi Kodwa, says that the flag will not be used as an instrument to sow divisions and hysteria in the country. Well, this morning, we get to sit down with the Democratic Alliance as Federal Executive Chairperson Helen Zille on Ask a Politician, and she joins us in studio. Just a reminder once again that we're also asking you to send through your questions, and here's the number. We're going to get that number on your screen, 072 110 5584. That's 072 110 5584. Send through your questions and we'll post those questions to Helen Zille, who joins us in studio. Helen, good morning. Thank you so much for making time for us.
Good morning, Aldrin. It's good to be with you.
I want to start with international relations and what has developed now with the ICC's chief prosecutor wanting a warrant of arrest against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as the defense minister, and of course the three other Hamas leaders. What's the Democratic Alliance's view around what is playing out? And do you support a warrant of arrest and a prosecution of somebody like a Benjamin Netanyahu?
We've not discussed that yet in the Democratic Alliance. This was a development yesterday, and I've been on the road since yesterday. But in any event, it is not my place to comment because I am now the head of the DA's administrative and organizational arm, and so I'm not the person to speak to on politics. The people who speak on this is John Steenhuisen and Emma Powell.
Yeah, but what's the DA's international relations approach to Israel?
Our international approach to Israel is to support a two-state solution, as we always have, and peace in the region. A secure Israel living within secure boundaries and a secure Palestinian state living at peace side by side.
How do we get there?
We get there not through capturing hostages and not through war, but agreeing that everybody has a right to live in the region and to make sure that we can negotiate a two-state solution in that context.
Yeah. Considering that some pundits are arguing that the position that the Democratic Alliance has taken on the war in Gaza, that this might have an impact on the popularity of the Democratic Alliance, especially amongst your Islam voters. What's the Democratic Alliance assessment of that heading into May 29?
Well, we have exactly the same position on the solution in the Middle East as the ANC officially does and as all other parties do. We support a two-state solution. And I don't know who these pundits are, but we will stand on principle on supporting a two-state solution and opposing anything that undermines that.
Have you done an assessment on it?
No, we haven't done an assessment on that I can certainly speak about. And it's not an issue we're focusing on particularly because nothing we say about the Middle East can change the situation there. Our job is to change the situation in South Africa. Our job is to rescue South Africa.
Yeah.
And nothing we say or do, and no posturing at all, is going to change anything in the Middle East.
Well, you're essentially a government in waiting, so it's important to ask these questions and to know exactly what the Democratic Alliance's stance on it is. Because after May 29, if the Democratic Alliance, for instance, does become the majority party, or even through a coalition, we would want to know what happens to the ICJ case, for instance. Would the South Africa, under the leadership of the Democratic Alliance, say, no, let's pull out of that? Would the stance, the international relations stance of South Africa's change and shift from what it is currently?
Well, I'm not going to go into hypothetical questions. Let's get into government and then we'll discuss it.
Well, I'm going to ask you questions about what happens when you come into government on education, for instance.
Good, do
and I'm
that.
sure you're going to have an answer for that. But what's the answer in relation to Israel in terms of your international relations approach once the Democratic Alliance is the government of the day, or if?
I've just told you what our answer is. Our answer is a two-state solution and anything that promotes a two-state solution. And
would the Democratic Alliance say pull out of the ICJ case?
I'm not in a position to answer that question. We haven't discussed this. I'm not the person sitting here alone taking a decision on behalf of the Democratic Alliance. The DA does not work like that. We have internal processes, internal structures that take policy decisions after debate. We don't work like the ANC or the EFF or the PA, where one supreme leader says, this is our position. We debate these issues. And of course, there's a wide divergence of positions on this particular issue within the DA. It would be very surprising if there weren't, because we represent the entire spectrum of the public of South Africa. We bring together Jews and Muslims, we bring together Christians and atheists, we bring together all of us who believe in defending freedom and the rights of others to hold different views.
Yeah.
So there are a very wide range of views in the DA on this question, and I can't sit here on television and invent a position.
Yeah, and again, Helen, I'm asking this on the basis that the Democratic Alliance is pushing to become the government of the day, and even if it is through the multi-party charter.
You guys make me laugh. You guys really make me laugh. You keep on telling us that we can't ever be the government, and then when you want to ask...
Who's you guys?
All the journalists and all the so-called pundits.
Where have you heard me say that?
Where have you heard the so-called pundits say what you say?
Where have you heard me say that, Helen?
The bottom line is...
Where have you heard me say that, Helen?
I haven't heard you particularly, but I have heard the pundits
Now,
say
I'm
that.
asking a question that the Democratic Alliance is pushing to become the government of the day, even through the multi-party charter. The Democratic Alliance has shown that it's actually willing to even speak to lawmakers in the United States, right? What's the reasoning behind that?
Look, I haven't been involved in any of the political discussions because I run the DA's administration and I run the internal management system. If you want to ask me about the blue machine, please do. I've been involved in no discussions with any lawmakers anywhere. I'm sitting here making sure the blue machine works. I haven't been part of caucus discussions on this issue, and I don't know who or if anyone has met with lawmakers in the United States. You clearly have information that I don't have. So I'd be very grateful to hear from you where that comes from.
Was Alan Winde not in the US?
Of course he was, as Premier. He was encouraging investment into the Western Cape.
Yes, but that's a position that the Democratic Alliance has taken.
No, it's a position that the Premier of the Western Cape has taken. We believe in a separation of party and state. That's how it works in the DA.
And he did have the support of the Democratic Alliance.
The Democratic Alliance did not send Alan Winde to the United States. The Democratic Alliance did not tell Alan Winde what to say in the United States. Alan Winde went as the Premier of the Western Cape. He is not under the instruction of the DA when he goes as Premier, and he may do what he likes within the confines of the law to promote the Western Cape, to ensure that we have trade in the Western Cape, to ensure that we grow jobs in the Western Cape.
Wait,
that is his job.
So are you saying that Alan Winde, as the Premier of the Western Cape, a deployee of the Democratic Alliance, can go into negotiations and conversations with a foreign nation, and the Democratic Alliance says that do as you will, as long as you promote the Democratic Alliance, we will not get involved in what those discussions are. We won't even ask you about them. Is that it?
I was the Premier of the Western Cape. I went to several parts of the world to promote trade, to promote investment, to promote inter-regional contact so that we could ensure that we could develop the Western Cape and get major input and investment into a range of social programs and into the economy. I did that all the time, and the DA didn't once interfere.
And James Self didn't know about it?
Why would we tell James Self?
No, I mean, I'm saying he didn't know about it.
Well, he would have seen in the newspapers about it, so I couldn't say he was ignorant about it. But the point is there's a separation between the party and the state. The DA nominates me as the Premier candidate. They trust that I understand the DA's policies, otherwise I wouldn't have got there. They trust me to do a job as Premier in terms of the Constitution and the law. I go overseas because I see, for example, in Germany, Bavaria, we've got an agreement with them. They give us a lot of resources. The KfW from Germany gives us a lot of project money for various things. I've gone to the Far East, I've gone to the Middle East, I've gone to European countries, and we've discussed these things all the time. The Western Cape benefited hugely, and not once did the DA say to me, Helen Zille, you may say this, or you must do that, or you may not do that. They trusted me. And they know that I understand the DA's policies and I will do the job that I have to do when I'm there.
Yeah. Could that be one of the reasons then that when you find leaders of the party that can do as they will, that led to what you refer to as the blue wobbly jelly under the tenure of Mmusi Maimane?
Not do as they will.
Okay.
We're the blue party because those of us who get into the top positions should have internalized the DA's values, principles and policies by then. And when we do things, we default to those values in the positions that we take. I know that seems amazing to everybody else, but we do that. And it's got nothing to do with everybody doing what they please. We have caucus positions, for example, on policy. But when
where do you discuss those?
In caucuses.
They start in caucus, so they wouldn't have started in the party?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
We have congresses, and then there are policy motions that are put forward. We have a policy conference every year before we go to the big congress. We have a whole range of systems and structures. We have a policy unit in the party. Those all formulate policy.
Yeah.
That's my job, to keep the machine working, and the machine works. And once those things are there, once those policies are there, then we can go forward and we can implement them and assume that our top office bearers know what they're talking about.
Okay. Just a final one on international relations. BRICS. Once the Democratic Alliance becomes government of the day, are we pulling out of BRICS? Is this something that the Democratic Alliance has had a conversation around, our involvement in BRICS as South Africa?
That's not an immediate issue for us.
It's not an immediate issue.
Our
okay.
immediate issue for us is rescuing the economy, is preventing joblessness from reaching 60% generally, of improving education, of fixing health, of ensuring that this disastrous NHI doesn't destroy what remains of the health system. That's our priority. And our priority is fixing South Africa. We will deal with the other things when we come into power, but now our absolute priority is to fix the economy, to get people into jobs, to ensure that education is fixed, health is fixed, that corruption is ended, and of course that energy is fixed, and that water infrastructure is fixed. Those are the DA's priorities. But you guys, and including you, Aldrin,
Helen, stop
yes,
doing that. Stop doing you guys.
You think you can pepper me with questions? I can tell you about you guys. You always want
Helen,
to drive us into a corner.
No.
Our job is to fix South Africa, Aldrin.
Yeah, Helen, stop doing the you guys thing. I'm speaking to Helen Zille as...
And I'm speaking to Aldrin Sampear.
And not you guys. I'm speaking to Helen Zille as a representative of the Democratic Alliance.
And you're a representative of Newzroom Afrika.
No, not a representative of you guys. Not a representative...
You guys in Newzroom Afrika, yes.
Of you guys. Maybe you can name the few that you want to name. Do you want to name them?
No, I don't want to name them.
Okay. On unemployment, I have to say that the DA has done something quite extraordinary. Having the lowest unemployment rate in the country, for me, is quite extraordinary. Also considering that this is the third biggest province that has the third biggest population, 21.4%. What would you say drove that? Whereas on the other end, you have the Eastern Cape, which is your immediate neighbor, and your immediate neighbor has the highest unemployment rate.
It's very simple. You have to create a context through government that attracts investment. People with skills, knowledge, and capital want to be where there's good government. They want to be in places where there's no corruption, where when you switch open a tap, clean water comes out, where sewage doesn't run down the streets, where you can travel on the roads because they're smooth, where the traffic lights work, and where the electricity comes on. And when you create that context and the rule of law with no corruption, then every business person in the country and anyone with capital and skills internationally who sees a business opportunity in South Africa wants to come to that region. And there's only one of those regions in South Africa, and that's the Western Cape. So in COVID time, when many people closed their businesses in the rest of the country, when they reopened them, they came and reopened them in the Western Cape. Yeah. That's the kind of thing that happens when you've got good government. And the only way you get good and accountable government is through the Democratic Alliance in South Africa. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to continue the conversation with Helen Zille because also you can back it up with census as well when it comes to access to clean drinkable water. The province has the lowest number of people who do not have drinkable water at 0.9%. That's 0.9%, which is the lowest. And also when it comes to electricity, 96.5%, the highest number of households that have access to electricity. But we continue our conversation with Helen Zille after this short break. And welcome back. We continue our conversation with the Democratic Alliance's Federal Executive Chairperson, Helen Zille, who's joining us in studio. I was saying just before we went to the ad break that the census results can also back you up in terms of the lowest number of households that don't have access to clean drinkable water, 0.9%. And then also the Western Cape has 96.5% of the households with electricity. What's the DA's vision around ensuring that there is sustainable supply of electricity? And this is now speaking about the entire country, not necessarily just for the Western Cape.
Well, where we govern, of course, we can only do it for the entire country if people vote us into office. So people get the government they deserve because it's the government they voted for. And if they want energy security, they will vote for the DA. Because where we are in government, we are rapidly moving to a point of achieving energy security. In Cape Town, for example, the load shedding stages are 2 stages lower than the rest of the country. And you'll see that again when load shedding comes back after the election, when the ANC government has stopped burning diesel at the rate they're burning it now, which is totally unaffordable.
Well, they said it went down by 74%, I think, compared to the previous period last year.
Well,
the same period last year.
Because they're burning diesel like hell, because they do not want load shedding before the election, because it'll remind everybody how useless the ANC is. So this is not a sustainable thing. But in the Western Cape, it is sustainable because there are major generation of electricity happening through the private sector that can feed into the grid and enable people who can't generate that electricity to use that electricity. Now, in Cape Town, for example, people who are generating electricity on the rooftops can sell it back to the city. And that subsidizes the electricity for poorer households, where Eskom is raising its tariffs all the time because they have to pay back the big loans on Kusile and Madupi and all of the other big white elephants that are sitting there costing the country millions.
Jordan Hill-Lewis was actually pushing and has been petitioned by some residents as well to have them removed from the Eskom grid and rather be part of the City of Cape Town's grid, and that has been rejected by Eskom.
Of course.
What's your take as the Democratic Alliance around that?
Well, you see, Eskom has to keep its customers. And tragically, its customers are mostly poor people, because middle class and wealthy people can put solar panels on their houses. And fortunately, in Cape Town, they can still feed it into the grid to help poor people access electricity. But Eskom needs a client base, and they need to raise the cost of electricity all the time because they've got massive loans of tens of billions of rands that they've got to pay back. So the tragedy is that wealthy and middle class people can get off the grid, get off the Eskom grid if they feel like it, and Eskom is desperate to keep some clients there. And that is the problem.
Yeah. Speaking about that, because that question also speaks to the level of inequality in the country.
That is being perpetuated and entrenched by the ANC and Eskom.
Okay, how's the DA going to deal with inequality when the DA is saying that do away with the minimum wage because it is hampering employment?
The best way to deal with inequality is to get people into jobs. The minute people are in jobs and earning, the Gini coefficient goes down, which is the measure of inequality. So critically, you've got to get people into jobs. We're a country with about 7 to 8 million registered personal taxpayers. We've got over 20 million grant recipients. That is totally unsustainable for any country. You just have to do the maths. So it's critical to get more and more and more people into jobs. And one of the things that is hampering job creation is the hurdles that people have to go through to employ people, and the almost impossibility of releasing people if they're not doing the job or if they're firing them.
Yeah.
And those kinds of things make people think, well, it's too risky and too difficult to start a business that employs people because the labor regulations make it just impossible for us to do that. And so we're saying take away the barriers to employment. Anything in South Africa that creates a barrier to employment is bad.
Is that the assessment or the review that you got from business and investors? Because I'm also wondering that if those are the issues that they are raising, how come then the Western Cape still has the lowest unemployment rate? Because the Western Cape was able to achieve the lowest unemployment rate with those impediments that the Democratic Alliance is speaking of, including a minimum wage.
Well, when you add up all the impediments together, they become impossible in the other provinces. So if you add up roads that don't work, dirty water, no electricity, corruption, no street lights and traffic lights, you can't transport your products, etc., plus all of those labour impediments, you say, to hell with this. This is really not worth it. But every now and again, there are studies that say, what are the biggest impediments to investment? Currently, the biggest impediment to investment, obviously, is the energy crisis, together then with BEE. People say they're not going through all of the stuff, and they're not going to invest in South Africa or start new businesses or expand their businesses because of these barriers.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest barriers is the labour regime. So in the DA in the Western Cape, we're reducing all the barriers we can. We're trying to reduce the cost of energy. We're trying to make energy secure. We're ensuring that people have clean water, refuse removal, good sanitation, massive investment in infrastructure, no corruption. That takes away a whole range of impediments to investment and job creation. Mm-hmm. We have still a whole lot left that the labour regime imposes, and if we could reduce those, we'd have many, many, many more people in employment, which is what we want.
How much would the Democratic Alliance pay the lowest paid worker a month?
The Democratic Alliance does not pay workers.
No.
Businesses pay workers.
Sure, we currently have a minimum wage, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to look up the figure now, just forgot it now, but just over 3.7, if I'm not mistaken. So that is the minimum wage per month. What would the Democratic Alliance say that this is an okay amount to pay somebody that is below 3.7?
I would never ever pay anybody 3.7. I think it's far too low. And I never have.
Why do away with the minimum wage?
Because that's my choice and that's a market choice.
Yeah.
The point is you must
listen,
Aldrin, don't ask me. Ask people who are unemployed what they're prepared to work for. If they're not prepared to work for what's on offer, they don't have to. But the point is you let the market regulate that, not me. It's got nothing to do with Helen Zille. When I employ people, as I have in the past, look at what I've paid them and look at that's between me and the person. Do they want the job?
Is that an approach of a government?
Yes.
That you decide whatever you want to pay your workers, and if the worker is willing to accept 500 Rand a month, that's okay. Is that it?
Let me tell you what is okay. What is okay is to allow the market to find the level and to enable people to get into work. Don't ask me, don't ask the theoreticians, ask the people who are unemployed and desperate for work. Ask them. Let them tell you if they're prepared to work for X and Y. If they're not, then they won't take it, and the wages will go up to attract workers.
You think so? In the country with such a high unemployment rate? We
need skills, and we need people in jobs. We need people in jobs. That is the most important thing.
Okay. We're asking you this morning also to send through your questions for Helen Zille, the Federal Executive Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, on 072 001 5584. This is the WhatsApp line, and some of the questions have already come through. This one from Tasneem from Mitchell's Plain. Dear Helen Zille, as the DA leader, what are you doing about inequality in education, especially in coloured schools? Our children need to dodge bullets going to school. They get robbed and killed in front of schools. Matriculants are left deserted, starting their matric year without subject teachers to teach them, and are left to find their own way because the department displays a lack of urgency. When it comes to coloured community, our children have a right to safety and equal education.
Thanks very much, Tasneem. The first thing is the Department of Education is not the Department of Public Safety. Now, it's very, very difficult for children to learn in dangerous conditions. I'm the first one to admit that. And when I was the MEC, we started this major Safer Schools program that we built up into a provincial-wide program that really did its very best to keep students safe. We worked very hard to do that. We put fences around schools. We had patrols around schools. We had walking buses and all of that sort of thing to make children safer. That is essential. But the truth is, Tasneem, you know this as well as I do, the people in those communities know who is shooting. They know who the gangsters are fighting for territory outside the schools. They know who's putting their children's lives at risk when they're going to school. And the community has to work with us. They've got to make it impossible for the people that they know in their community running around shooting to do so. Those people have to be ostracized and isolated. The police have to...
How do you think you can do that?
Well, the police have to, because people have to be prepared to give evidence against them and put them behind bars.
At a risk of being killed as well.
Well, that's the point. You see, now you've got right to the point. The education department must deal with extortion, bribery, and threats of death and violence in a community. The education department can't do that. It can't do that. So what we have to do through the public safety department, and that's a national government competency, justice and the police, they have to make sure we have absolute safety for witnesses. We have to make sure that we get people into court and we get them sentenced. We cannot have a situation where communities are too scared to give evidence against the people who are shooting their children and then blame the education department. It doesn't work that way. We have to do our job. We have to put the schools there. We have to put the teachers there. We have to ensure that the resources are there. But after that, we cannot take responsibility for what happens in people's homes and necessarily every responsibility for what happens around the school.
Do you think unemployment contributes to that?
Yes, of course it does.
It does.
But you see, gangsterism contributes to unemployment.
Okay.
Now, let me tell you this, that underlying gangsterism is drugs and drug abuse. And the single biggest crisis amongst our youth today is drug abuse. No one begins to understand how pervasive this particular problem is. And I'm sure Tasneem knows, and many other parents know, when we do programs in the Western Cape government to recruit youth to internship programs, we say you can't be on drugs in order to do that. And we have to turn away many, many, many kids because they don't pass the drug test. You do not know how pervasive that problem is. And again, there's a limit to what a government can do to resolve it. That's the problem that parents have to help resolve. And a range of other actors have to help resolve. A government alone cannot solve this problem.
So society must also be part of it. We'll continue to take your questions on 072-010-5584, and this one from Tinyiko Mashele. May she please explain how she understands the importance of the national flag, and does she think that people, especially blacks, will trust the Democratic Alliance to not take them back to apartheid system should they win through black votes?
Firstly,
Tinyiko.
Tinyiko. Thank you, Tinyiko, for that question. Let me tell you this. I fought apartheid as hard as I could with what I had where I was when that system, that evil system, was predominant in our country. I would never, ever, ever be in a party that wanted to take South Africa back to apartheid. I want to take South Africa to a country of prosperity, of inclusion, where young people have skills, aren't on drugs, get jobs, aren't falling pregnant in their teens, all of those things that governments alone can't solve. That's the society that we want. And all of our policies contribute towards achieving that society. There is no way, Tinyiko, and if anybody tells you that we would take South Africa back to apartheid, they are lying. The National Party went in with the ANC, not us. They split from us because we didn't accept their philosophy, and they went with the ANC. So that is where the National Party is today. They helped you through
a coalition, though.
They helped, and they helped us get a majority. But
and
now,
you're okay with accepting them to come on board?
Well, we got power through it, and we could implement our policies. And look how the Western Cape has gone forward through that.
Okay, I'm actually going to ask you about the paper that you're holding there, the Star's front page, and get your response to it. But we're going to get the response to the Star's front page just after that. It is in relation to the flag question and the human rights lawyers taking the matter to the Equality Court. We'll get Helen's view on that just after the short break. Well, we're about to conclude our conversation with the Federal Executive Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, Helen Zille, who's joining us in studio ahead of the upcoming elections. And you were touching on the flag, the question that came from Tinyiko about the flag. And I was saying that the Star's front page actually has a story about Zuko Madikana, a human rights lawyer, who's taking the party to the Equality Court. What's the Democratic Alliance's view on this case?
Oh, you've given me a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to say you guys again. And by you guys, I mean you and Mashudu Sadike, who wrote this article for The Star and for the Pretoria News. Because you accept that this guy is a human rights lawyer. Actually, if you just do a little bit of research, you'll find that he is a fraudster who was found guilty of fraud in January 2023, and who is taking us to court purporting to be a human rights lawyer, when he's got actually no grounds to do it. Because if he was a lawyer, he'd look up at PEPUDA, the Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act, and he would see that this doesn't qualify as hate speech. He's posturing.
Yeah.
And if you guys, like you, Aldrin, and Mashudu Sadike, did the slightest bit of research, the headline on this paper would be, bogus lawyer pretends to lay charges against the DA.
I'd actually advise you, Helen, to go and watch our paper run that we do every morning, and we actually raised that particular point about, does he actually have a case? Is this actually a matter that
is he actually a human rights lawyer? That's the first question. Is he actually a human rights lawyer?
The paper's reporting that he is a human rights lawyer.
That's why I say you guys. That's why I say you guys. You just pick it up.
What do you make, though, of this particular case, and also the division that came from the decision that the Democratic Alliance took to burn the South African flag, which is very provocative, yeah? It has that provocative nature to it, but it also made some people feel that why would the Democratic Alliance be so violent in such an approach?
The one party that isn't violent is the Democratic Alliance.
Sorry?
The one party that is not violent is the Democratic Alliance. Now, Aldrin, if you watch that video, you will see that it's not the Democratic Alliance burning that flag. It is the coalition between the ANC, MK, and the EFF that is burning that flag.
They put a match to it.
That's the whole point we're making. South Africa will burn to ashes under that coalition. And at the end of the video, you see the flag restored in all its glory. Rescue SA, vote DA. That's the whole point. South Africans surely can understand metaphor. We never burnt a real flag. That's a digital image.
It is still the flag.
And, well, let me tell you, when there was the protests that Ace Magashule was running in the Free State, they were literally burning real flags.
Helen, are you going to compare yourself to...
No, but the point is you've got a double standard. To even ask that question, you've got a double standard. So let me say this.
So we shouldn't ask the question because people protesting, was it in support of Ace Magashule?
Yes.
Is in support of Ace Magashule burned the South African flag, and therefore the question can't be asked to the Democratic Alliance.
You can ask the question, and I'm answering you. Okay. We didn't burn any flag. We were showing graphically and through metaphor, which I think most literate people can understand. That
most literate?
And illiterate people. I mean, metaphor is absolutely woven into all our languages. So people understand metaphor, right? We're showing that if the ANC, MK and EFF come to power, South Africa will burn. Right. If we want to restore the flag and to restore the hope of this prosperous democracy that we once shared, the only way to do it is through voting DA. That's obvious. You don't have to be a professor to read that into the ad. This is all really what I call outrage manufacturing and offence seeking. There's so many people who...
But you knew that it was going to come.
Of course.
Exactly.
Of course.
So you manufactured the outrage. You knew that it was going to come,
Helen. We knew that the manufacturers of outrage...
You manufactured the outrage. You knew that it was going to come.
We knew it was going to come, but that doesn't mean to say we created it. It means that we knew how many outrage manufacturers are out there and how many professional offence seekers there are out there, particularly in the media. You guys.
Let's quickly go to this question now from Lebu. Thank you so much for sending through your question, Lebu. Good morning, Ms. Zille. It would seem that the MK party will, quote, spoil some votes of the ANC and to some degree the Democratic Alliance. Do you agree? The EFF believes that it will occupy the second post as an official opposition after the May polls. Let's work on this hypothesis. If you drop votes and lose the second spot, will the DA review the leadership of John?
The DA has internal processes, and we do a major analysis after every single election. We look at the things that went well, we look at the things that went badly, and by the way, the flag ad was not one of the things that went badly. We will review everything, and we will ensure that we fix what's wrong, and we continue to do what's right and build on that. So I can give you the assurance that the DA has strong internal institutions that work. I'm in charge of making sure they work, and you can be absolutely sure that the Federal Council will meet, The federal executive will meet, we'll do a full review of the election, and we'll take it from there.
Okay. On the MK party, what's your analysis, what the MK party, or the threat that the MK party poses for the Democratic Alliance, especially with the multi-party charter, which has the IFP, and the IFP, which has a stronghold in the Western Cape? What does that mean for the multi-party charter?
Well, what does it mean for South Africa is much more important. Because if you look back, everyone's talking now about these 9 wasted years that we had under Jacob Zuma. It's common cause that he was deeply corrupt. It's common cause that with his friends, the Guptas and others, he was the architect of state capture and the collapse of our SOEs, our state-owned enterprises, the collapse of Eskom, etc., etc. That is accepted as common cause.
Yeah.
Yet, there are hundreds of thousands, I was going to say millions, but possibly even millions, hundreds and thousands of South Africans who are going to vote for him. What does that tell you? What does that tell you?
I don't know, Helen.
I know.
I am the journalist here.
No.
You are no longer the journalist.
You know what? I'm allowed to ask you as many questions as you ask me.
What does it mean, though, for the multi-party charter? And we've already seen with the by-elections that they are taking away some votes from the IFP, of the ANC, as well as the EFF.
Well, you know, that side of of this political spectrum is crumbling. And what it basically means is that the ANC is on such a downward spiral that it will never recover. Its disintegration will become quicker and quicker. But I think we've seen with Mr. Khumalo and Mr. Zuma that they're not on such a sound footing as far as internal conflict is concerned. So what it basically means is that that side of the spectrum of politics is fragmenting, and our side has to consolidate. And that's what it means.
Do you still believe that the EFF is behaving like a Hitler, like the Nazis?
Well, the EFF is very clear on its policy. They are very clear. They believe a supreme leader must control the party, that the party must control the state, and that the state must control the economy and society. That is totalitarianism. They say it themselves. I don't have to say it for them. They say it themselves.
Yeah, but do you still liken them to Hitler?
Well, any totalitarian regime, Stalin, Hitler, whoever.
Okay.
Ceausescu, whoever.
Helen, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. We'll meet at the Rock.
We'll meet at the Rock. We'll meet you guys at the Rock.
We'll meet at the Rock. Helen Zille is the Federal Executive Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. And of course, we will reach out to Zuko Matikana, whom the Star reports as a human rights lawyer. And of course, Helen Zille saying that, listen, this man is a fraudster.